Maria Gonzalez never imagined that a routine patrol through the mountains of Colombia would change her life forever. The morning sun cast long shadows across the rocky terrain as she adjusted her tactical vest and checked her service weapon one final time. As a member of the elite Colombian National Police Special Operations Unit, she had completed hundreds of missions, but something felt different about this one. The intelligence reports had been unclear. Scattered radio chatter suggested rebel activity in the remote valley below, but nothing concrete enough to warrant a full-scale operation. Maria's unit of 12 officers had been tasked with reconnaissance only. Their orders were simple: observe, report, and retreat if necessary. No engagement unless absolutely unavoidable. Maria had earned her position through years of rigorous training and unwavering dedication. Born in a small village outside Bogotá, she had watched her father struggle to make ends meet as a local police officer. The corrupt officials and drug cartels that plagued their community had made his job nearly impossible. When Maria turned 18, she made a promise to herself and her family that she would make a difference. The police academy had been brutal. Physical training that pushed her beyond her limits, tactical exercises that tested her mental resolve, and weapons training that demanded absolute precision. Maria excelled in every category, but it was her uncanny ability to remain calm under pressure that set her apart from her peers. Her instructors noted that while other recruits would panic during high-stress simulations, Maria seemed to enter a state of focused clarity. Her marksmanship scores were legendary within the academy. On the shooting range, she could place 10 rounds through a target the size of a playing card from over 200 meters away. Her preferred weapon was the standard-issue Galil assault rifle, but she was equally proficient with handguns, sniper rifles, and even improvised weapons. What made her truly exceptional, however, was her ability to make split-second tactical decisions while maintaining perfect accuracy. After graduation, Maria was assigned to routine patrol duties in Bogotá. The city streets were a different kind of battlefield, where drug dealers and gang members posed constant threats to civilian safety. She quickly gained a reputation among her colleagues for her fearless approach to dangerous situations. While other officers might hesitate when facing armed criminals, Maria would assess the threat, formulate a plan, and execute it with surgical precision. Her superiors took notice when she single-handedly apprehended 3 armed bank robbers during what should have been a simple traffic stop. The criminals had opened fire on her patrol car, but Maria had used the vehicle as cover while systematically neutralizing each threat. Her tactical report was so detailed and professional that it was used as a training example for new recruits. The promotion to special operations came after only 2 years of service. The unit was tasked with the most dangerous missions in the country: counter-terrorism operations, high-value target extractions, and deep reconnaissance in rebel-controlled territories. Maria thrived in this environment, where her skills were constantly tested and refined. Now, as she crouched behind a boulder overlooking the valley, Maria felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that came before every mission. Her team leader, Captain Rodriguez, was studying satellite images on a tablet while the rest of the unit took defensive positions. The plan was to establish observation posts at 3 different locations and monitor rebel movement patterns for 48 hours. Maria was assigned to the western ridge with 3 other officers. The position offered excellent visibility of the main access road into the valley, but it also left them exposed to potential counter-surveillance. She noted several possible escape routes and identified the best defensive positions should they come under attack. As the team moved into position, Maria's radio crackled with routine check-ins from the other observation posts. Everything seemed normal, almost too quiet for an area that intelligence suggested was crawling with rebel activity. She adjusted her scope and began methodically scanning the terrain below, looking for any signs of movement or unusual activity. The first indication that something was wrong came when the radio chatter stopped. Maria tried to raise the other observation posts but received only static in response. Her team leader frowned and attempted to contact base command, but their long-range communications were also down. They were alone and effectively blind to what was happening around them. Maria felt her training kick in as she assessed their situation. 3 possible scenarios ran through her mind: equipment failure, natural interference, or deliberate jamming. Given their location and mission, The third option seemed most likely. Someone knew they were there, and someone didn't want them communicating with the outside world. The attack came without warning. The distinctive crack of sniper fire echoed across the valley as one of Maria's teammates collapsed beside her. Before she could react, automatic weapons fire erupted from multiple positions, catching her team in a carefully planned crossfire. The rebels had been waiting for them, and they had walked directly into a trap. Maria rolled behind cover as bullets shattered the rocks around her position. Her training had prepared her for ambush scenarios, but the coordination and precision of this attack suggested they were facing professional soldiers rather than typical rebel fighters. These were commandos, and they had been planning this operation for some time. As she tried to locate the enemy positions, Maria realized that her team was severely outgunned and outnumbered. The radio jamming meant that backup was not coming, and their elevated position, which had seemed advantageous for observation, now made them sitting targets. They had perhaps minutes before the enemy could maneuver close enough to overrun their position. Captain Rodriguez was shouting orders, but his voice was barely audible over the gunfire. Maria could see that he was wounded, blood streaming from his shoulder as he tried to coordinate their defense. The other two members of her team were pinned down behind inadequate cover, unable to return effective fire without exposing themselves to the enemy snipers. Maria knew that their only chance of survival was to break the enemy's tactical advantage. The commandos were using classic military doctrine: fix the target in place with suppressive fire, while assault teams moved to flanking positions. Once those teams were in place, her unit would be eliminated with ruthless efficiency. She began to formulate a plan that would have seemed impossible to most soldiers. The enemy had superior numbers, better positions, and the element of surprise. But Maria had something they didn't expect: the ability to think clearly under extreme pressure and the skills to execute seemingly impossible tactical maneuvers. What happened next would test every aspect of her training and push her abilities far beyond anything she had ever experienced. Story Part 2. The intensity of the gunfire increased as Maria pressed herself against the rocky outcropping. Fragments of stone and lead buzzed through the air around her position like angry hornets. She could hear Captain Rodriguez attempting to establish communication with base command, his voice strained with pain and frustration. The radio produced nothing but static, confirming her suspicion that sophisticated jamming equipment was being used against them. Maria's tactical assessment of the situation became clearer with each passing second. The enemy had positioned at least two sniper teams on the opposite ridge, approximately 400 meters away. Their muzzle flashes revealed high-quality rifles with advanced optics, far superior to the equipment typically used by rebel forces. These were professional military operators, possibly foreign mercenaries or special forces advisors working with the local insurgents. The automatic weapons fire was coming from 3 distinct positions in a coordinated crossfire pattern. The enemy had clearly studied the terrain and prepared firing positions in advance. They knew exactly where a reconnaissance team would establish observation posts, and they had turned those advantages into kill zones. This was not a chance encounter, but a carefully orchestrated ambush. As Maria analyzed the enemy's tactics, she noticed something that most soldiers would have missed in the chaos of combat. The timing of their fire was too precise, too coordinated for independent units operating without communication. They were using hand signals or short-range radio systems that suggested a level of training and equipment that confirmed her worst fears. These were elite commandos, not irregular fighters. The situation deteriorated rapidly when she heard Captain Rodriguez cry out. A second bullet had found its mark, this time in his leg, and he was losing blood quickly. The other 2 members of her team, Sergeant Martinez and Officer Torres, were trapped behind a cluster of boulders that provided minimal protection. Every time they attempted to return fire, the enemy snipers would force them back into cover with precisely placed shots. Maria realized that traditional defensive tactics would not save them. The enemy had superior firepower, better positions, and the luxury of time. They could simply maintain suppressive fire while additional teams moved to flanking positions. Within minutes, her unit would be surrounded and eliminated with clinical efficiency. The first indication that the enemy was moving to close the trap came when Maria spotted movement. Approximately 200 meters to their north, 2 figures in military fatigues were advancing through the sparse vegetation. using natural cover to mask their approach. They moved with the fluid precision of experienced special operations soldiers, never exposing themselves for more than a few seconds at a time. Maria understood that she had perhaps 60 seconds before these flanking teams would be in position to deliver the killing blow. The mathematical reality of their situation was stark. 4 lightly armed police officers against what appeared to be at least 8 professional commandos with superior equipment and tactical advantage. By any reasonable calculation, her team was already dead. But Maria had never been reasonable when it came to combat situations. Her mind began racing through possibilities that would have seemed impossible to conventional military thinking. The enemy's strength was their coordination and superior firepower, but it was also potentially their weakness. They were operating according to standard small unit tactics, which meant their movements and positioning followed predictable patterns. She began to formulate a plan that violated every principle of tactical doctrine she had been taught. Instead of maintaining defensive positions and attempting to hold out until rescue arrived, she would go on the offensive. The enemy would not expect a single officer to abandon cover and attack superior forces in broad daylight. The audacity of such an action might provide the split-second advantage she needed. Maria began preparing for what she knew would be the most dangerous gamble of her life. She checked her Galil assault rifle and confirmed that she had 2 full magazines remaining. Her sidearm, a reliable Beretta 92, contained 15 rounds. She also carried 4 fragmentation grenades and a combat knife. Against 8 commandos in fortified positions, it seemed laughably inadequate. The key to her plan was understanding the enemy's psychology and tactical mindset. Professional soldiers, especially elite units, operated according to established doctrines that had been proven effective over decades of warfare. They would expect her team to either attempt to escape down the reverse slope of the ridge or try to hold their positions until ammunition ran out. They would not expect a frontal assault by a single officer. Maria waited for the next lull in enemy fire, knowing it would come when the assault teams repositioned for their final attack. Professional soldiers conserved ammunition and coordinated their movements to avoid friendly fire incidents. This discipline, which made them effective as a unit, would also create brief windows of opportunity for an unconventional response. The moment came when the automatic weapons fire ceased for approximately 3 seconds. Maria could hear shouted commands in a language she didn't recognize, possibly Russian or Eastern European. This confirmed her suspicion that they were facing foreign military advisors rather than local rebels. These men were professionals who had fought in conflicts around the world, but they had never faced someone like Maria Gonzalez. Captain Rodriguez managed to catch her eye during the brief pause in gunfire. His face was pale from blood loss, but his expression showed that he understood what she was planning. He gave her a slight nod and prepared to provide what covering fire he could manage with his wounded shoulder. Sergeant Martinez and Officer Torres were too, focused on their immediate survival to notice Maria's preparations. Maria took a deep breath and visualized the terrain between her current position and the enemy's main strong point. She would have to cover approximately 150 meters of open ground while under fire from multiple positions. The route she had chosen would take her through a series of shallow depressions and rock formations that might provide momentary cover, but success would depend entirely on speed, surprise, and her ability to accurately engage targets while moving at full sprint. She knew that once she left cover, there would be no turning back. The enemy would concentrate all their firepower on her position, and her teammates would have only seconds to take advantage of the distraction she created. Everything depended on perfect timing and execution under impossible circumstances. As Maria prepared to begin her assault, she thought briefly of her father and the promise she had made to make a difference in their war-torn country. She had never imagined that keeping that promise would require her to attempt something that bordered on suicide. But as the sound of approaching enemy soldiers grew closer, she realized that conventional tactics would only ensure that all 4 members of her team would die in this remote valley. The time for planning was over. Maria gripped her rifle tighter and prepared to execute a maneuver that would either save her team or ensure that her final moments would be spent fighting rather than cowering behind inadequate cover. The decision that would define the rest of Maria's life came in a moment of perfect clarity. As she heard the distinct sound of tactical boots moving across loose gravel somewhere to her left, she knew the enemy assault teams were less than 30 seconds from achieving their flanking positions. Once those commandos reached their designated spots, her team would be caught in an inescapable crossfire that would end the engagement in a matter of moments. Maria looked once more at her wounded captain, who was struggling to maintain consciousness, while blood seeped through his tactical vest. Sergeant Martinez was frantically trying to establish radio contact with anyone who might provide assistance, but the sophisticated jamming equipment was rendering their communications completely useless. Officer Torres, barely 22 years old and on his first special operations mission, was visibly shaking as he clutched his rifle behind the inadequate protection of a boulder. The mathematics of survival were brutally simple. 4 police officers with limited ammunition and no possibility of backup against at least 8 professional commandos with superior weapons, better positions, and the tactical initiative. Every military manual ever written would classify their situation as hopeless, recommending surrender as the only rational option. But Maria had spent her entire career proving that rational calculations didn't always determine the outcome of armed conflicts. Her plan violated every principle of small unit tactics she had ever learned. Instead of maintaining defensive positions and attempting to minimize casualties while waiting for rescue, she would abandon cover and launch a solo assault against the enemy's strongest position. The audacity of such an action might provide the psychological shock necessary to disrupt their coordinated attack pattern. Maria began her mental preparation ritual, the same process she had used before every high-stakes mission throughout her career. She visualized the terrain between her current position and the enemy stronghold, identifying every possible piece of cover along the route. She calculated distances, estimated travel times, and planned her angles of attack with the precision of a mathematician solving a complex equation. The first phase of her assault would require crossing approximately 40 meters of completely open ground before reaching a cluster of rocks that might provide momentary concealment. During those crucial seconds, she would be exposed to fire from at least 5 different enemy positions. Survival would depend entirely on speed and the element of surprise. Maria checked her equipment one final time. Her Galil assault rifle contained 28 rounds in the current magazine, with 1 additional full magazine secured to her vest. The Beretta pistol at her hip held 15 rounds plus 1 in the chamber. 4 fragmentation grenades were clipped to her tactical belt, and her combat knife was secured in its sheath on her right thigh. Against 8 commandos in fortified positions, it seemed pitifully inadequate. The psychological aspect of her plan was as important as the tactical elements. Professional soldiers, particularly elite units, operated according to established doctrines that had been proven effective through years of training and combat experience. They would expect her team to either attempt escape or try to hold their current positions until ammunition was exhausted. They would not anticipate a single officer abandoning cover to launch a frontal assault against superior forces. Maria waited for the next coordination pause in enemy fire, knowing it would come when the assault teams moved into their final positions. Professional commandos maintained strict fire discipline to avoid fratricidal incidents during complex maneuvers. This tactical sophistication, which made them effective as a coordinated unit, would also create brief windows of opportunity for an unconventional response. The moment arrived when automatic weapons fire ceased for approximately 4 seconds. Maria could hear urgent commands being shouted in what sounded like Russian, confirming her assessment that they were facing foreign military contractors rather than local insurgents. These were experienced soldiers who had probably fought in conflicts across multiple continents, but they had never encountered someone willing to attempt what Maria was planning. Without hesitation, Maria exploded from her covered position and began sprinting toward the enemy's main stronghold. Her sudden appearance in the open triggered immediate responses from multiple sniper positions, but her speed and unexpected movement direction caused their first shots to impact several meters behind her position. The element of surprise was working exactly as she had calculated. As bullets whistled past her head, Maria maintained perfect situational awareness while running at full speed across treacherous terrain. Her peripheral vision tracked muzzle flashes from enemy positions, while her primary focus remained fixed on the route ahead. Years of physical conditioning allowed her to maintain maximum sprint speed while carrying full combat equipment across uneven ground. The first cluster of rocks provided exactly 3 seconds of concealment before enemy fire began impacting all around her position. Maria used those precious moments to assess the enemy's response and adjust her plan accordingly. The Commandos were reacting with professional efficiency, but their positioning and fire patterns revealed crucial information about their tactical setup. She had identified the location of their command element, recognizable by the concentration of radio antennas and the protective positioning of other team members. Neutralizing the command structure would disrupt their coordination and create opportunities for her teammates to escape or counterattack. But reaching that position would require crossing another 60 meters of open ground under fire from multiple automatic weapons. Maria's second sprint took her through a shallow depression that provided minimal concealment but allowed her to approach the enemy position from an unexpected angle. The Commandos were adjusting their fire to track her movement, but their training emphasized precision over volume of fire. This discipline, which made them effective in conventional engagements, was working against them in this chaotic situation. As she reached the next piece of cover, Maria could hear Captain Rodriguez attempting to provide supporting fire despite his wounds. The distinctive sound of his Galil rifle indicated that he was engaging targets on the northern flank, trying to prevent the assault teams from completing their encirclement. His sacrifice was buying her precious seconds, but she knew his ammunition would not last long. The third phase of her assault would be the most dangerous. Maria would have to cross the final approach to the enemy command position while under direct observation from their security element. There would be no concealment, no element of surprise, and no possibility of retreat. Success would depend entirely on her ability to engage multiple targets with perfect accuracy while moving at maximum speed across broken terrain. Maria prepared for what she knew might be the final moments of her life. Every aspect of her training, every lesson learned through years of dangerous police work, and every instinct developed through countless hours of combat preparation would be tested in the next 60 seconds. The outcome would determine not only her survival but the fate of her entire team. The moment Maria committed to her final approach, time seemed to compress into a series of crystalline snapshots. Her mind entered the state of hyper-awareness that she had experienced only a few times before in her career, when split-second decisions meant the difference between life and death. Every detail of the battlefield became sharp and clear. The exact position of each enemy muzzle flash, the trajectory of incoming rounds, the texture of the ground beneath her feet. 20 meters ahead, she could see the enemy command position clearly for the first time. 3 Commandos were positioned behind a natural rock formation that provided excellent protection from conventional angles of attack. Their radio equipment and the positioning of their security elements confirmed that this was the nerve center of the enemy operation. Neutralizing these 3 men would disrupt the coordination that made the ambush so effective. Maria's tactical assessment revealed both opportunities and deadly threats. The command team was focused on coordinating the assault against her teammates' position and had not yet adjusted to deal with her unexpected flanking maneuver. However, 2 additional Commandos positioned approximately 15 meters to their right had clear fields of fire across her approach route. She would have to engage and neutralize all 5 targets in rapid succession to avoid being overwhelmed. The physics of her situation were unforgiving. She was moving at nearly maximum sprint speed across uneven terrain while carrying full combat equipment. Accurate shooting under these conditions required techniques that pushed the boundaries of what was considered possible in small arms combat. Maria would have to transition from high-speed movement to precision shooting in fractions of a second, multiple times while under fire from professional soldiers. As she approached the final phase of her assault, Maria made a tactical decision that would have seemed impossible to most soldiers. Instead of seeking additional cover before engaging the enemy, she would attack while still in motion, using her speed and the element of surprise to overwhelm their ability to respond effectively. The technique was called shooting on the move and required thousands of hours of practice to master. The first target presented itself when one of the security element Commandos spotted her, approached and began to pivot his automatic rifle in her direction. Maria's response was instantaneous and precise. Without breaking stride, she brought her Galil to her shoulder and fired a controlled burst of 3 rounds. The bullets impacted center mass at a range of approximately 25 meters, neutralizing the threat before he could acquire her position. The sound of gunfire from an unexpected direction caused immediate confusion in the enemy ranks. The remaining commando in the security element spun toward Maria's position, but his movement was predictable and poorly executed under pressure. Maria's second engagement eliminated this threat with a single well-placed shot to the upper torso, demonstrating the lethal accuracy that had made her legendary at the police academy. The command element was now aware of her presence, but their positioning made rapid response difficult. The rock formation that protected them from conventional attacks also limited their ability to engage threats approaching from the flank. Maria exploited this tactical weakness by closing the distance rapidly while the Commandos struggled to reposition their weapons and acquire clear sight pictures. Her assault on the command position required split-second timing and perfect execution. As the first commando attempted to bring his rifle to bear, Maria fired while still in motion, her bullets finding their target before he could complete his firing position. The second commando managed to get off a short burst of automatic fire, but his aim was rushed and the rounds passed harmlessly to Maria's left. Maria's response to the incoming fire demonstrated years of advanced combat training. Instead of diving for cover or returning fire from a stationary position, she continued her forward momentum while engaging the second target. Her movement made her a difficult target to track while allowing her to maintain the psychological pressure that was disrupting the enemy's tactical cohesion. The third member of the command element proved to be the most dangerous opponent. Unlike his companions, this commando maintained his composure under pressure and attempted to use proper defensive techniques. He positioned himself behind the most substantial cover available and tried to coordinate with the remaining assault teams through hand signals. Maria recognized the threat he posed and knew that eliminating him would require her most advanced skills. The engagement with the command element leader tested every aspect of Maria's combat abilities. He was positioned behind cover that protected him from most angles of attack, and his experience showed in the way he used controlled bursts of fire to keep her from advancing. Maria realized that conventional tactics would not work against this opponent and that she would need to use the terrain and her superior mobility to create an opportunity. Maria's solution involved a maneuver that would have been considered reckless by military standards. She used one of her fragmentation grenades not to cause casualties, but to create a distraction that would force the enemy leader to momentarily shift his attention. The explosion provided exactly the psychological disruption she needed to close the distance and engage him from an angle he could not defend. The neutralization of the command element created immediate tactical confusion among the remaining enemy forces. Without coordinated leadership, the assault teams that had been moving to flank her original position lost their tactical cohesion. Maria could hear shouted commands in multiple languages as the surviving commandos attempted to reorganize their attack without knowing the exact situation at the command post. Captain Rodriguez, despite his wounds, recognized the opportunity that Maria had created and began directing effective counterfire against the disorganized enemy positions. Sergeant Martinez and Officer Torres emerged from their defensive positions and began engaging targets that were no longer protected by coordinated suppressive fire. The tactical initiative had shifted completely in their favor. Maria assessed her ammunition status and realized that her assault had consumed most of her rifle ammunition. She had eliminated 3 targets with precision shooting, but several enemy soldiers remained in fighting positions around the valley. The immediate threat to her team had been neutralized, but the engagement was far from over. The surviving commandos would attempt to reorganize and resume their attack, and she needed to maintain the pressure to prevent them from regaining the initiative. The transformation of the battlefield in less than 60 seconds demonstrated the importance of unconventional thinking in combat situations. By abandoning defensive positions and launching an aggressive assault against superior forces, Maria had achieved what military theorists would consider impossible. However, she knew that maintaining their advantage would require continued aggressive action and perfect execution under pressure. The tactical situation had transformed completely, but Maria knew that her advantage would be temporary. Professional soldiers, even when disrupted and disorganized, possessed the training and experience to recover quickly from unexpected setbacks. The remaining commandos would attempt to reestablish communication, assess their losses, and formulate a new plan of attack. She had perhaps 2 minutes before they regained their tactical cohesion. Maria quickly inventoried the equipment captured from the neutralized command position. The enemy had been using sophisticated communications gear that explained their ability to coordinate the initial ambush so effectively. More importantly, she discovered detailed tactical maps that revealed the full scope of their operation. What her team had walked into was not a simple ambush, but part of a much larger military action. The maps showed positions for at least 15 additional enemy soldiers positioned throughout the valley, along with planned routes for reinforcement columns that were apparently en route to the area. Her unit had stumbled into what appeared to be a major insurgent operation, possibly aimed at establishing a permanent base of operations in this remote mountain region. The implications were staggering and would require immediate communication with headquarters. But first, Maria had to ensure the survival of her team and complete the neutralization of the immediate threats. From her new position, she could observe the remaining enemy soldiers attempting to regroup approximately 200 meters away. Their movements showed confusion and uncertainty, but she could see that they were beginning to establish new defensive positions that would make subsequent attacks much more difficult. Captain Rodriguez's voice crackled through her earpiece as their short-range communications began functioning, again with the destruction of the enemy jamming equipment. His report was grim but encouraging. He was losing blood but could still function, and both Sergeant Martinez and Officer Torres were uninjured and in fighting condition. However, their ammunition supplies were running critically low after the extended firefight. Maria realized that she needed to maintain the psychological pressure on the remaining enemies while her team repositioned to more defensible terrain. The Commandos' greatest remaining advantage was their superior numbers, but their morale had been severely shaken by the rapid destruction of their command element. If she could eliminate one or two more targets quickly, the survivors might choose to withdraw rather than continue an engagement that was no longer proceeding according to their original plan. Her next target was a sniper position that had been providing overwatch for the original ambush. The sniper was positioned on a rocky outcropping approximately 150 meters from her current location, and his elevated position gave him excellent visibility of the entire battlefield. Eliminating this threat would remove the enemy's ability to observe and coordinate their remaining forces effectively. The approach to the sniper position required Maria to cross approximately 100 meters of partially concealed terrain while remaining undetected by both the sniper and the other enemy soldiers who were attempting to regroup. She would have to use every piece of available cover while moving quickly enough to reach the target before the enemy could establish new defensive positions. Maria began her movement using techniques she had learned during advanced reconnaissance training. Instead of moving in straight lines, she followed a serpentine route that took advantage of natural depressions and rock formations to mask her approach. Her movement was deliberate and controlled, designed to avoid creating visual signatures that might alert the enemy to her position. The sniper proved to be extremely well-trained and disciplined. His position was expertly chosen to provide maximum fields of fire while offering excellent protection from counterattack. Maria could see that a conventional approach would be impossible without sophisticated equipment or coordinated support from multiple directions. She would need to use deception and misdirection to create an opportunity for engagement. Her solution involved using the captured enemy radio equipment to create the impression that additional police units were approaching the valley from multiple directions. By broadcasting false radio traffic on frequencies she had observed the Commandos using, Maria hoped to convince the sniper that his position was about to be surrounded by superior forces. The psychological pressure might cause him to abandon his carefully prepared position. The deception worked better than Maria had dared hope. Within minutes of beginning her false radio broadcasts, she could observe increased activity among the enemy positions as they attempted to respond to threats that existed only in her fabricated communications. The sniper began showing signs of nervousness, frequently scanning different sectors, rather than maintaining disciplined observation of his assigned area. Maria exploited the sniper's distraction by moving to within 50 meters of his position while he was focused on scanning for the phantom police units she had described in her radio transmissions. At this range, her accuracy with the captured enemy rifle would be devastating, and the angle of approach she had chosen would prevent him from using his prepared defensive positions effectively. The engagement with the sniper required perfect timing and execution. Maria waited until he was completely focused on a different sector before rising from concealment and acquiring her target. The shot was taken from a supported position at a range where her accuracy was guaranteed, and the result was immediate and decisive. The elimination of the overwatch position left the remaining enemy forces effectively blind to her movements. With the sniper neutralized, Maria could observe the full extent of the remaining enemy forces. 4 commandos were positioned in a defensive cluster approximately 200 meters away, and their body language suggested they were considering withdrawal from the engagement. The rapid loss of their command element and overwatch position had fundamentally altered the tactical balance, and they were no longer operating from a position of strength. Maria made the tactical decision to maintain pressure on the demoralized enemy forces rather than allowing them to organize an orderly withdrawal. Professional soldiers who were allowed to retreat intact might return with reinforcements or establish new ambush positions along potential escape routes. Complete neutralization of the threat was necessary to ensure her team's safety and prevent future attacks on other police units. Her approach to the final enemy position required the most careful planning of the entire engagement. The 4 remaining commandos were positioned behind substantial cover with overlapping fields of fire, and they had had time to establish proper defensive positions. Unlike her previous targets, who had been surprised or disorganized, these soldiers would be prepared for her attack and would respond with coordinated defensive fire. Maria's analysis of the enemy position revealed both strengths and vulnerabilities. Their defensive setup was textbook perfect for repelling frontal attacks, but it was designed to defend against conventional assault tactics. The position had not been prepared to deal with the unconventional approach angles that Maria's superior knowledge of the terrain would allow her to exploit. The final phase of the engagement would require her to use all remaining ammunition and equipment in a coordinated assault that would either eliminate the remaining threats or leave her in an untenable position. There would be no opportunity for retreat or regrouping if her attack failed. Everything depended on perfect execution and the element of surprise that had served her so well throughout the engagement. Maria's final assault would require every skill she had developed throughout her career and push her tactical abilities beyond anything she had previously attempted. The 4 remaining commandos had positioned themselves in a natural fortress of rocks that provided excellent protection from conventional angles of attack. Their overlapping fields of fire created a kill zone that would be nearly impossible to cross using standard military tactics. However, Maria's intimate knowledge of mountain warfare and her ability to think beyond conventional parameters gave her options that the enemy would not anticipate. During her reconnaissance of their position, she had identified a narrow ravine that approached their stronghold from an unexpected direction. The route would require her to traverse treacherous terrain while remaining undetected, but it would allow her to attack from an angle that their defensive preparations had not considered. The approach through the ravine tested every aspect of Maria's physical conditioning and tactical skills. The terrain was loose rock and scattered debris that could easily cause noise or movement that would alert the enemy to her presence. She had to move with the silence of a hunter while carrying full combat equipment and maintaining readiness for immediate action if discovered. As she navigated the treacherous route, Maria could hear the enemy soldiers communicating in hushed tones. Their conversation revealed crucial information about their mental state and tactical situation. The rapid destruction of their command structure had clearly affected their morale, and they were debating whether to attempt a fighting withdrawal or try to hold their position until reinforcements arrived. Maria realized that the enemy's uncertainty about their situation provided her with a psychological advantage that could be as valuable as tactical positioning. Professional soldiers were trained to execute predetermined plans, but they were less effective when forced to make critical decisions under pressure without clear command guidance. Their hesitation and debate indicated that they were no longer operating with the confidence and coordination that had made their initial ambush so effective. The final approach to striking distance required Maria to cross approximately 30 meters of completely open ground while remaining undetected by 4 alert and heavily armed opponents. The technique she employed was one of the most advanced skills taught in special operations training, using micro-terrain and natural camouflage to become effectively invisible to observers who were not specifically searching her exact location. Maria's movement was so careful and deliberate that it took nearly 15 minutes to cover the final 30 meters. Every step was calculated to avoid creating visual signatures or sounds that might alert the enemy sentries. She used the natural shadows created by rock formations and sparse vegetation to break up her silhouette, making her effectively invisible to observers who were focused on other sectors. During her approach, Maria overheard fragments of the enemy's tactical discussion that provided crucial intelligence about their remaining capabilities and intentions. The Commandos were debating whether to establish radio contact with their reinforcement column, which was apparently still several hours away from their position. This information confirmed that her team would face additional threats if the engagement was not concluded quickly. The positioning of the 4 remaining enemies revealed both their tactical expertise and the limitations of their current situation. They had established interlocking fields of fire that covered all conventional approach routes, but their focus on frontal defense had created a vulnerability in their rear security. Maria's unconventional approach route had brought her to within striking distance of their position without detection. Her plan for the final engagement required precise timing and the coordinated use of her remaining equipment. Maria had 2 fragmentation grenades, approximately 20 rounds of rifle ammunition, and her sidearm with a full magazine. Against 4 professional soldiers in prepared positions, she would need to achieve perfect results with each weapon system to neutralize the threat completely. The first phase of her attack involved using 1 fragmentation grenade to disrupt the enemy's defensive coordination while simultaneously engaging the most dangerous target with precise rifle fire. The explosion would create momentary confusion and force the enemies to seek different cover, exposing them to follow-up attacks during their movement. Maria identified the enemy team leader through his positioning and the deference shown by the other soldiers. This individual was maintaining radio watch and appeared to be the most experienced fighter in the group. Eliminating him first would remove the enemy's ability to coordinate their defense and might cause the remaining soldiers to panic or make tactical errors. The execution of her plan required split-second timing that left no margin for error. Maria positioned herself to have clear sight lines to multiple targets while remaining concealed behind a large boulder that would provide protection from immediate counterfire. She armed the fragmentation grenade and prepared her rifle for rapid precision shooting. The grenade detonated exactly where Maria had intended, creating massive disruption in the enemy position without causing immediate casualties. The explosion showered the area with rock fragments and created a dust cloud that obscured visibility, while the concussion temporarily disoriented the defenders. Maria used this confusion to eliminate the team leader with a precisely placed shot that neutralized him before he could respond to the attack. The remaining 3 commandos reacted with professional training, immediately seeking new cover positions while attempting to locate and engage their attacker. However, their movement patterns were predictable based on the terrain and their training, allowing Maria to anticipate their actions and position herself for follow-up engagements. The second target presented himself when he attempted to establish a new firing position behind a cluster of rocks approximately 20 meters from Maria's location. His movement was rapid but exposed him for the few seconds necessary for Maria to acquire and engage him with devastating accuracy. The engagement demonstrated the lethal effectiveness of her marksmanship skills under combat conditions. The elimination of the second commando caused the remaining 2 enemies to recognize that they were facing an opponent who possessed capabilities far beyond what they had anticipated. Their tactical communications became urgent and desperate as they attempted to coordinate a response to threats approaching from multiple unexpected directions. Maria's psychological assessment of the remaining enemies revealed that their confidence had been completely shattered by the rapid destruction of their unit. Professional soldiers were trained to function under extreme pressure, but the systematic elimination of their teammates by an unseen opponent was creating stress levels that exceeded their training parameters. The third engagement required Maria to expose herself to return fire from the remaining enemies, but their accuracy had been severely compromised by stress and the confusion created by her unconventional tactics. She eliminated the third target while absorbing ineffective fire from the final remaining commando, whose shooting had become wild and uncontrolled. The last enemy soldier, recognizing that his situation was hopeless, attempted to surrender by dropping his weapon and raising his hands. However, Maria's tactical assessment indicated that accepting surrender would create unacceptable risks for her team's safety. Professional commandos were trained in escape and evasion techniques that might allow him to escape and provide intelligence. about her unit's capabilities to enemy forces. The final engagement lasted less than 3 seconds and demonstrated the clinical efficiency that had characterized Maria's entire assault. The neutralization of the last commando completed the destruction of the enemy force that had seemed so overwhelmingly superior just minutes earlier. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of Captain Rodriguez calling her name through the radio. Maria's systematic elimination of 8 professional commandos in approximately 79 seconds would become legendary within Colombian law enforcement circles. Her tactical innovation and flawless execution under impossible circumstances had saved her team and prevented what could have been a devastating blow to police operations in the region. The engagement demonstrated that superior training, determination, and unconventional thinking could overcome even the most unfavorable odds. As she began moving back toward her team's position, Maria reflected on the transformation that had occurred during those crucial minutes. She had entered the engagement as a police officer following standard procedures, but she had emerged as something entirely different, a warrior whose capabilities would be studied and emulated by special operations units around the world. The immediate aftermath of the engagement brought a silence that seemed almost unnatural after the intensity of combat. Maria moved carefully through the battlefield, conducting the systematic security sweep that her training demanded while her mind struggled to process what had just occurred. In less than 80 seconds, she had single-handedly eliminated 8 professional commandos who had possessed every tactical advantage except her willingness to attempt the impossible. Captain Rodriguez's voice crackled through her radio with a mixture of relief, amazement, and professional concern. His wounds required immediate medical attention, but the nearest evacuation point was several hours away through treacherous mountain terrain. The destruction of the enemy jamming equipment had restored their long-range communications, allowing them to finally establish contact with headquarters and request emergency medical support. The response from base command reflected the magnitude of what Maria had accomplished. Initial reports of her single-handed assault against superior forces were met with skepticism, until Captain Rodriguez provided detailed confirmation of the tactical situation and casualties. The elimination of an entire enemy commando unit by one police officer operating alone was unprecedented in the history of Colombian law enforcement. Within hours, helicopters arrived to evacuate the wounded and extract Maria's team from the remote valley. The medical personnel who treated Captain Rodriguez noted that his survival was directly attributable to the rapid neutralization of enemy forces that would otherwise have prevented any possibility of rescue. Maria's actions had not only saved her team but had also prevented what intelligence analysis later revealed would have been a major insurgent operation. The captured enemy equipment and documents provided intelligence services with crucial information about foreign military involvement in Colombian insurgent activities. The sophisticated weapons, communications gear, and tactical planning materials confirmed that the commandos had been part of a much larger operation aimed at establishing permanent rebel strongholds in remote mountain regions. Maria's accidental discovery and destruction of this advanced team had disrupted plans that had been months in development. The official investigation into the engagement required Maria to provide detailed, written reports and undergo extensive debriefing sessions with tactical analysts and military experts. Her minute-by-minute account of the battle was studied by special operations units throughout Latin America as an example of how unconventional thinking and flawless execution could overcome seemingly impossible odds. Military theorists struggled to categorize what Maria had accomplished because it violated fundamental principles of small unit tactics that had been proven effective over decades of warfare. Her decision to abandon defensive positions and launch a solo assault against superior forces should have resulted in her immediate death, according to every tactical manual ever written. Instead, she had achieved complete victory while suffering no casualties among her team members. The psychological analysis of Maria's performance revealed personality traits and mental capabilities that set her apart from typical law enforcement personnel. Her ability to maintain perfect clarity of thought under extreme stress, combined with her willingness to attempt maneuvers that others would consider suicidal, created a unique combination of skills that military psychologists found difficult to explain or replicate. Recognition of Maria's extraordinary achievement came from the highest levels of Colombian government and international law enforcement agencies. She received decorations for valor that had never before been awarded to a police officer, and her tactical innovations were incorporated into training programs for elite units throughout the region. However, the attention and accolades did little to change her fundamental approach to her duties. Maria's perspective on the engagement remained characteristically modest and focused on practical considerations rather than the historical significance of her actions. When interviewed by military historians, she emphasized the importance of thorough training, physical conditioning, and mental preparation rather than any special personal qualities that might have contributed to her success. Her analysis of the battle focused on tactical lessons that could benefit other officers rather than the unprecedented nature of her achievement. The long-term impact of the engagement extended far beyond the immediate tactical victory. Intelligence gathered from the neutralized commando unit led to the identification and disruption of several other foreign-sponsored insurgent operations throughout Colombia. Maria's accidental discovery of this particular cell prevented what could have been a significant escalation in the country's ongoing internal conflicts. International military observers who studied the engagement noted that Maria's success had implications that extended far beyond Colombian law enforcement. Her demonstration that properly trained and determined individuals could overcome superior forces through unconventional tactics challenged assumptions about modern warfare that had influenced military doctrine for decades. The captured enemy weapons and equipment were subjected to detailed technical analysis that revealed sophisticated modifications and capabilities that suggested involvement by advanced military organizations. The level of training and equipment possessed by the Commandos indicated that Colombian insurgent groups had access to resources and expertise that posed serious threats to regional stability. Maria's return to regular duties was complicated by the attention her actions had generated within law enforcement and military circles. Requests for her participation in training programs and tactical consultations came from agencies throughout Latin America and beyond. However, she insisted on maintaining her assignment to active operational duties rather than accepting positions that would remove her from direct law enforcement activities. The psychological aftermath of the engagement proved to be one of the most challenging aspects of Maria's experience. While she had demonstrated extraordinary capabilities under extreme pressure, the reality of having eliminated 8 human beings in combat created emotional burdens that required careful management and support from qualified counselors who specialized in post-combat stress. Years later, tactical analysis of Maria's engagement continued to influence military and law enforcement training programs around the world. Her combination of tactical innovation, physical skills, and mental resilience under pressure became the standard against which special operations personnel were measured. The 79 seconds that transformed her from a police officer into a legend remained one of the most studied combat engagements in modern military history. Maria Gonzalez returned to her duties with the Colombian National Police, where she continued to serve with distinction while carrying the knowledge that, when faced with impossible odds, human determination and unconventional thinking could still triumph over superior forces and advanced technology. Her story became a testament to the power of individual courage and skill in the face of overwhelming adversity.